Namaste. In this video, let us understand the arguments against the policy of protection. We know that trade policy is the policy of the government towards exports and imports. Broadly speaking, trade policy can be divided into the policy of a free trade and policy of protection. Policy of free trade is a policy which draws no distinction between the exports and imports. It is a non-discriminatory trade policy. On the other hand, the policy of protection is a policy of discrimination which favors exports and discourages imports in order to protect the domestic industries. So there are number of arguments in favor of a protection, like infant industry argument or protection of employment argument and revenue argument and diversification of the industry argument, defense industry argument, and so many arguments. So in this video, let us understand what are the demerits of a protection or arguments against the policy of protection. The policy of protection should not be considered as a remedy for industrial development and national self-sufficiency. The policy of protection is a beggar my neighbor policy. Today we focus on win and win situation. Today we focus on rich my neighbor approach because we know that poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity. But the policy of protection make our trading partner poorer and poorer. So the policy of restricted imports by every country that are following the policy of protection or protection in imports would ultimately curb the foreign trade. It not only curbs the foreign trade, but also its share in the world trade will diminish. Most important argument against the policy of protection is it leads to lethargy. That is the attitude of the domestic manufacturer. The protection policy makes the domestic manufacturers lethargic and lulls them to sleep without taking sincere and serious efforts to develop the industries. When once the industry get protection, they like to continue that forever. Though protection is essential at the initial and infant stage, vested interest would demand protection as a matter of right. So the industry, as long as it continues to be inefficient, it gets protection under the umbrella of protection. So it want to continue to be an inefficient industry without taking any measures to improve its efficiency. So protection may lead to inefficiency and lethargy among the industries, and in order to enjoy protection, they may try to be inefficient forever. The second important limitation or argument against protection is the policy of protectionism encourages corruption. People connected with industries desiring protection, they corrupt the legislators. So protectionism promote corruption. Protection leads to the exploitation of the consumers. Consumers' interests are neglected. The most important victim under the policy of protection is the consumer, and his interests will not be considered. Under the guise of national development and self-sufficiency, the consumer will have to pay higher prices for commodities produced in such protected countries. In a poor country, by adhering to the policy of protection, the poor people will have to be penalized or will be penalized by means of high price to enrich the already rich manufacturers. This leads to inequalities, widen the gap between haves and have-nots. So, the most important argument against protection is the exploitation of consumers. The next argument against the policy of protection is it leads to misallocation of resources. An economy, in order to achieve development, need to ensure proper allocation of resources. But protection leads to misallocation of resources because it leads to inefficient pattern of resource allocation, which causes a decline in the level of productivity in the economy. Under protection, a nation is induced to protect the inefficient industries. That means resources will be utilized or allocated for inefficient industries, so that lead to lower productivity, underdevelopment of the economy, etc. The most important limitation of the policy of protection is that it creates monopolies. We know that emergence of monopoly is detrimental to the consumer's welfare. Protection leads to the emergence of monopoly power. The protected industry, the industry which enjoys protection, will also be protected from foreign industries, foreign products. So domestic market is assured to the protected industry. That means it emerges as a monopoly power and by eliminating competition. Finally, it leads to retaliation, and there is a danger of retaliation. Protection is likely to invite retaliation by other countries. If we adopt the policy of protection, if we don't encourage imports, naturally foreign counterpart also will resort to the policy of protection and they will not import goods from our country. So when we restrict our imports, our exports also will decline. This leads to friction among the nations. The protection fails to benefit any country. It also is a threat to world peace. So in this video, we have understood various arguments against the policy of protection or demerits of protection policy. Thank you very much.